Good morning, Europe, and good night, America. We're here today to talk about two buzzwords, FinOps and AI. And the reason why, everybody is using AI these days. And if private people use subscriptions, organizations move to large consumption models where you use AI, and for every token, for every call, you build actual pretty significant consumption rates. So that's one aspect of that. And how do you control those costs? With FinOps. If you've never heard this term, I'll explain it very simply. It's a discipline that helps organizations keep cloud costs under control. And what is AI is, if not another cloud cost? On the other hand, these two buzzwords are also used in a different meaning when now FinOps practitioners began using AI to actually simplify their work of controlling costs. So the topic of today's conversation was, as far as I remember, how we announced it, FinOps for AI or AI for FinOps. But it's not really a versus. These two things now exist together in one ecosystem. And today with me, I have Mike Stevenson from Kavai, if I pronounce it correctly. It's a tool vendor. It's a FinOps tool vendor. And my colleague, the CTO of SAMexpert Cloud, Stefan Denk, who's a FinOps practitioner, and a little bit of a names drop. Stefan was responsible for implementing FinOps practices in such names as Nestle and Swisscom. So he knows his stuff. And if you never heard me first time on this on our channels or on LinkedIn, because we broadcast to YouTube and LinkedIn at the moment, I'm one of the founders of the SAMexpert project, which is a consulting company, and this channel. So welcome everyone, gents. I think Stefan, I think it will be courtesy to pass the mic first to Mike. Sorry for this rhyme. And let Mike maybe say a few words. And then actually, Stefan, feel free to step in, because I'd rather you two practitioners discuss together, and I will just interrupt you sometimes and maybe ask you tricky questions. It's not my stage.
Yeah. So Sasha, do you want us to do a quick intro, or do you want us to just jump in and talk?
Maybe this is up to you. If you want to kind of set the scene for why we're here, what concerns you.
Yeah. So I think my background is I'm a Microsoft architect, consultant for many years since Azure first came out. I've got a long history in the Microsoft MVP community, about 17 years as an MVP. Specializing in integration and architecture, and I got into the FinOps world a few years back, and nowadays I'm CTO for Turbo 360, which is an ISV product to help people with Azure FinOps. And I think when we talk about this session, I think what's interesting is that there's two, like you said, they're not really competitors, but there's two different kind of activities happening in the FinOps world around AI. So FinOps for AI and AI for FinOps, and I think people maybe don't necessarily understand that there are two and what the differences are and how these different things can help you, and that's what we were hoping to kind of chat about a bit today, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Sounds good to me. So how about we start with FinOps for AI, because this is probably closer to the people who are already looking into cloud costs, and then we can later on branch into how you can actually leverage AI to make your FinOps thing work a little easier.
Yeah, definitely. Do you want me to give you my sort of 2 cents on that topic to begin with? So I think the first thing, I guess, if we think of the evolution of FinOps, the challenge is, and I think you touched on this, Sasha, in our first podcast last week, where cloud's not getting less complex over time, it's getting more complex, and that's kind of the catch-22 in a way, that we thought it'll solve a lot of problems, and actually it's just introduced whole loads of new problems, and AI's really kind of leveled that up a bit, because we can do amazing things with AI. You and I were chatting just before about how you're doing a few projects with AI, and it's helping us solve problems in ways we haven't really done, but it also means we have to pay for things in ways we're not really used to either. So The simplest one is tokens. We pay per token. What even is a token anymore? Like a couple of years ago, if you said you're going to be paying for your cloud based on tokens, everyone would be like, what? What does that even mean? And I guess the closest representation is probably something like, if you're in the Azure space, maybe something like a function app or a logic app where you're paying per execution is probably the closest historically we were used to. But actually, it's much more complex than that, because it's not really per request. It's based on what's in the request and what the AI, maybe you've got an agent that does stuff and then it gets more data. So it's really much more based on like almost volume of data is probably the easiest way to think about it if you're not used to that token concept. And then if we think about, that's just one model of AI, because we also have other use cases where it's all about licenses. So if you're using things like Copilot and Claude, initially that was like a per user license, and then we know that that's all starting to change a lot over the last few weeks. So it's just changing all the time, getting more complex, and I think that's where people are already struggling, probably going to struggle a bit more till it sort of levels out. And hopefully that's really what today's podcast is about, is thinking about that, isn't it?
Yeah, I would like to give it a slightly different spin from my experience so far, and then let's just see in a conversation where we can bring these two different ways of looking at the same problem together. I think adoption of AI is simply happening. A lot of people don't consider what this means. So nobody goes into AI adoption and looks at the price lists and says, okay, for Claude Opus 4.7, I pay $25 for 1 million output tokens and some dollars for 1 million input tokens, because as you say, nobody really understands what this works out to be. I think what a lot of people do is they arrive at an invoice, which eventually will start small as the first 2, 3, 5 people use it. And as they determine that this is actually very helpful and they unleash it on the organization, all of a sudden this thing just explodes. And then it becomes a problem overnight when the first bigger than expected invoice is hit and you are just partway through your rollout plan. Now, one of the big issues which I see around this one is the public clouds. They took years. They took the work of the FinOps focus group to actually provide one consistent set of cloud cost billing, which is readily made available to you. I mean, you have to jump through a few hoops with Google Cloud, but AWS and Azure, they both have native features to just give you Focus 1.2, which is pretty damn good to do FinOps work with. You can load it into tools. Even freeware tools exist now, which are worked based on this standard, and you can visualize the cost across clouds. No such thing exists when you are doing Notebook LM with Google, or when you're doing Claude with Anthropic, or you're doing OpenAI with, ChatGPT with OpenAI. Sure, it kind of works for your applications, and you give these API keys, and you use a tool like Light LLM or something else to capture what these API keys do. But any browser interactions which your developers, your office workers, your knowledge workers have, it's just captured completely out there. Every provider has their own portal. Every provider has their own way to show you the billing. And it's just becoming a nightmare for people who have to manage this. Quoting a CTO we are working with, he tells us he now has to check in 8 different portals every week to compile a report manually to give to his CIO how much they are spending on cloud.
I think there's an interesting point, Stefan, as well, with what you said there about... So if we think about cloud, right? Cloud existed, went on its journey, and then FinOps kind of came and sort of reined it in and standardized some stuff, and people can work based off the focus model now. But I guess what's interesting is obviously AI is kind of coming on later when those standards exist, and in some cases, the focus standard related to billing to AI at a billing level is one thing, but the consumption that you really need to understand the billing level data is actually kind of quite different as well, isn't it? So I think there's also going to be challenges around how do you relate those two, but also for me, AI is changing so rapidly, and I think it's important to remember there's different kinds of AI solutions as well that don't really work in the same way. We talk about tokens, for example, but even just on Azure, if you think about the vision AIs and the document intelligence AIs, they work in very different ways. And while you might get a bill and line item, if you want to decompose that to what it actually means, again, it's very different. And I think that's the complexity that FinOps people are going to have to start understanding, isn't it? And it's kind of, it gets FinOps practitioners deeper into the engineering space, I think, to be able to just do the bare minimum.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. To me, this is going in the same trend as shared server farms have gone in the past. Kubernetes clusters are already doing, with the downside that on the Kubernetes clusters, for example, you already get very good per application, per pod usage information, which allow you to do a technical breakdown of how much am I paying for my combined infrastructure of this Kubernetes cluster to the cloud. This is what you will find in a cloud bill, but you won't find a breakdown that from these 7 applications running on your piece of infrastructure, which percentage of the cost do you need to assign to each of these applications? So your granular showback is complicated. And where Kubernetes, for example, is already giving you such metrics to allow you to do a breakdown, doesn't quite exist. If I look at, for example, OpenAI usage within Azure, you have a limit of 30 OpenAI instances in a subscription. So customers who don't use tens or hundreds of subscriptions will likely have shared services, also so that they can profit and buy reserved capacity, which gives a very good rebate. So again, there are FinOps mechanics you can use, like committing to certain capacity, committing to certain throughputs, committing to certain numbers of minutes per month, etc. They all give you a way to buy the same for a lower per unit cost. So definitely FinOps mechanics still apply. Now, the question then becomes, if you see a $20,000 bill for one resource, one line per day, how do you break this one apart on the 5 constituent applications who are using this? You may even need to bill it to different business entities who are responsible for these apps. And this is actually a very interesting challenge, which you cannot resolve with the tools the cloud gives you natively. The only way I found so far is that you are using man-in-the-middle tools, basically like a proxy, which you deploy in your own environment, who then provide you with this information. So basically your application calls the proxy then forwards the call to the AI provider. And as the response comes, it keeps track of which application made this response, how many tokens, what was the cost, and a few other metrics. And then you can actually use this to build your FinOps report. So it introduces more complexity, an additional tool, some manual implementations. It's not really coming out of the box, at least to what I know so far.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, actually, because I was thinking when we started the conversation, it's fairly likely we'll get talking about architecture decisions as well, because obviously the easiest thing is, I write some code, it calls my LLM directly, and it just works. But like you say, the proxy, it's interesting. A few weeks' time, we've got an event I'm doing where there's a lot of talk about Azure API management as the role of that proxy, which I think a lot of Azure customers will eventually start moving to that pattern of a proxy. But I think what the other big benefit of the proxy is, if we think of an AI agent that I build, it's not just the call to the LLM, because the LLM is going to call back to the agent and execute MCP tools. And the question is, well, actually, my agent then calls another service, or maybe another 10 services. How do those costs for that bit play into, and if I'm leveraging that proxy for APIM and the MCP capabilities as well, again, I've centralized that login so I can get some kind of, centralized holistic usage of my AI across, regardless of which LLM, which tool, etc. And then at least I've got a data source to work from, haven't I? Which minimizes the challenge of 10 different data sources. And the other thing to remember is all of that login data has got nothing to do with focus or FinOps, really. It is like its core intention. So this comes to the complexity of the FinOps practitioner having to interpret some kind of login to then correlate it back to the FinOps data.
Yeah, you basically end up either using a focus adapter, which the tools may or may not provide to you.
Yeah.
And if not, then you're basically back to taking CSV or API data and map this to focus specifications so that you can actually merge it into your cloud cost and then have something like a union view over what are you spending on Azure, on AWS, on Google, on Anthropic, directly with OpenAI, with whatever other service you're using out there. And that's a quite formidable challenge. And I don't really see the tools helping you there a lot. As I said earlier, it's tools exist when you are building your application, which uses its API key to continue to query these things, but especially your office workers. Their direct interactions, which we as end users kind of know. You just go on the web page and then you talk with Notebook LM or you talk with ChatGPT. We have our subscriptions for this, so this is kind of a per seat management. But as we are going into an enterprise context, you're paying per seat, but also for every token which you consume, which comes on top of that. So where we as private users have an included amount, and eventually it says you have reached your usage limits. No such usage limit on enterprise accounts. And you basically pay for the first token. So there are no included amounts anymore. And capturing this one is an interesting one, especially as these end users potentially even start building their own agents. And we had one example given by an IT leader we talk with, one of our customers for whom we do Azure FinOps. He said, well, I had one of my people build an AI agent that was looking through their emails every 10 minutes. But because of a coding mistake, it would not just look at the last few emails, it would look at all emails every 10 minutes. That's millions and millions and millions of tokens every single day because it basically reads the whole inbox every time again.
It's noise, isn't it? A lot of that consumption's really just noise. Do you have something, Sasha, there?
I have something to add for those. I hope business decision makers may still watch by this point, not being turned away by a lot of technical terms being thrown in, which are absolutely correct. I'm not stopping you, gents. I want to raise awareness about Microsoft E7. It's a new package that was just introduced by Microsoft, officially sold starting 1st of May. So we are 21 days into that already. And what E7 is, it's a package that creeps into consumption billing. If you pay for traditional Microsoft E3 and E5, you pay per user per month. It's a fixed price. It's a subscription price. There may be surprises, but they're not so significant. E7 is a frontier package that is not designed for everyone in the organization to use. So that's for heavy AI users, people that need AI, people that need to create and govern agents. And E7 gives you a little bit in basic functionality. You still pay $99. There are now promos. You can buy it for like $60 for a while, for a limited time, almost for the price of E5. But the trap is that you can govern the agents, but the agents you create with it start consuming AI at consumption rates. It has security copilot built in with a predefined package. What happens when you run out of that package of security units? I don't remember the exact SCU, security something units. It starts billing you for overages. So suddenly the genie is out of the bottle.
Yeah.
And it's no more constrained by the cost of the package. And therefore the whole conversation, what just Stefan brought up about going into overages, it's real. With OpenAI, for example, you can have 3 different subscription models with fixed price, which is like Pro, Max, and Max 20. Almost like they copy what Claude does as well. On enterprise plans, you only get the $20 subscription, and there are no bigger packages. You go above $20, suddenly you spend $20 in a few hours. Well, I'm a victim. I didn't notice that my agents keep talking and exchanging information, trying to build something together. And the bill was $500 per day.
Yeah.
From their work. because I went into the averages. Costs go rapidly up. So it's not theoretical. We live in this reality.
I think there's a really key, like if we, I know we want to talk about AI for FinOps as well, and need a little bit, leave some time for that. But I think one key point I'd like to get across in FinOps for AI is I think there's a huge opportunity actually that comes into play for FinOps people and particularly architecture people here, because if we think about FinOps, in my opinion, most of the customers that I come across, the horse has already left the stable before they really start thinking about FinOps in any kind of serious manner. And you're always trying to remediate and catch up and that kind of thing. And I think with AI, because of the level of complexity, what people will probably start doing is they'll probably start thinking more about cost in the design stage, because they'll design with cost in mind rather than, because if you think that really makes sense from a risk perspective, yeah, exactly, that's what you hope, yeah. So for me, one of the problems on cloud is, and I said this to somebody yesterday, actually, I think it always surprises me. I feel like there should be more architects in the FinOps community, and people are designing solutions without really understanding how cost works for the solution they design, which just seems crazy. And I think that'll have to start changing, where architects will have to understand costs at a much deeper level. And we bring cost thinking forward and do cost-driven design. And that'll be the way people will have to tackle the AI challenge. And it's just a question of, are you going to wait till your big, massive bill that you can't do much about happens, or are you going to start doing it before you start?
Mike, I want to challenge you on this, and don't take it as an insult, but I think it's wishful thinking.
I agree.
I can tell you why. There are two reasons. One is empirical, the other one is purely organizational. So the empirical argument that I have is that I have been in software asset management since 2003, so 23 years. And I did software asset management before that. I just didn't know it's called software asset management. So a large chunk of my life, and the whole conversation, even before FinOps, even before we hit real time, taximeter ticking, whether you use something or not, it's still ticking and you have to pay. Even before that, I've been trying to evangelize the idea of infrastructures compliant by design, licensing design being part of the IT design. It hasn't happened, and it's taken already 20 plus years. Software asset management exists from mid 90s, and I agree with you 100%. It needs to be, cost design needs to be part of the design. So what will be that wake-up call? That is the question. Maybe sudden explosion of costs. Will it be industry-wide? Maybe not. Maybe it'll be company-wide. Somebody will just say, "Oh, fine. You know what? Like I did, I had this $1,000 suddenly, of expenses that I didn't expect." Will I be more careful now with designing my process? Yes, but even I'm talking about this right now. Would I spend a lot of time on cost planning? Not yet. So it will be at the back of my mind, but not yet. So this is a massive paradigm shift. And the second argument to say that it may be, I don't want to sound rude. I said wishful thinking just to put a bumper sticker on it. It's because people building solutions are not metered. They're not rewarded for cost savings. They are rewarded for, I want that tomorrow.
Yeah, I agree.
I have the same internal dialogue with the solutions that we build for our company. Shall we spend a few more days on planning and plan for costs, potential disruptions and whatnot, or our client demands it now, so let's roll something out, something, solve the immediate problem, and then forget to fix it.
I think the velocity versus governance and accountability is a massive part of that, isn't it? It's such a, it's been such a bias towards user enablement for such a long time. And I agree with you. I think what I'm saying is this is what it should look like. The pragmatic part of me says a lot of people aren't going to do that until something goes wrong, and then somebody gets the blame for it or something like that, But I think that's what people should be thinking about. And I think the one bit I think I would say back to your challenge, Sasha, is I think leadership in companies are far more aware of the risk that they carry than they used to be. Just because of the growth of the FinOps community and the negative stories people have had on their cloud bills at various points. And I think if maybe 5 years ago, I would say people weren't anywhere near as conscious of the risk as they are these days. That would be my hope of what starts transforming that. But do you, Stefan, look like you might have some thoughts on that?
Yeah. So on the risk, what I see in the engagements where we are bringing FinOps in is that the CIOs, the CTOs, they are approaching AI with quite a bit of trepidation. They know they will have to adopt AI, but cost concern is top of their mind. So there I hear questions like, how can we do it right from the get-go, rather than making the expensive mistakes, which we have made with our cloud migration, for example, where we were then brought in midway to save the day for the CIO, for the CTO, for whoever basically then saw a cloud migration, exploding costs, things getting way more expensive, nobody being able to really solve that problem. So there's more awareness around the AI costs. And I think, Sasha, you brought up a beautiful example. $500 a day, you realized it on day 2. How would the business have looked like if you had realized this at the end of the month and you would have taken a $15,000 unexpected charge?
Different.
Yeah. And this is what I mean. So the velocity of finding these things, I believe the first thing that you as a FinOps person should do as your company is adopting AI, and this is where you can then leverage AI, because we can now slowly transition at the midway point towards what AI for FinOps actually does for you. It's super powerful to quickly build new features. Sure, you shouldn't probably be just slapping together production apps which you're releasing to your customer base, to your audience, to somewhere out there. But for internal tools, it is so incredibly powerful. I have a designer who is now able to build his own games, his own applications, because he could always do the UI bit, but he needed somebody to do the coding bit. Now he has figured out enough of AI coding. Took him a while, but now he can basically blow live into the mock-ups he created in the past. And now it's no longer a mock-up, now it's actually a working application. Nothing to release on production, but it's definitely something that can be shown. And what you should be looking at is for the AI providers you are using. They will all have their different ways to provide their billing information via an API. Pull in this information, convert it into something which you can display in the dashboards of the tools that you already have built for Focus and for your FinOps work. And then simply make it available, put some anomaly management, some budget alerts, some thresholds, whatever on there. So if you have some runaway costs happening in the organization, you can signal this within a day. Maybe it happens on the Friday afternoon and you only see it on Monday. This is in 3-4 days where the organization bled, but at least you are aware of the bleeding before the invoice comes. And you can quickly react to that one. This is probably one of the most important things where you can provide value right now. And it doesn't need a whole lot of work. I mean, worst case, pull CSVs on a regular basis with an export job and just merge this with the tooling you already have to see what are we spending on these AI providers. Sorry?
That's a pretty beautiful music, though. I hope YouTube won't stop this stream for copyright infringement or something like that.
I think at the start of the
podcast... sorry there, didn't put the phone on silent. Screw up.
We had the really good music on the start of the podcast as well, so I thought that might be a kicking in. Let me throw my 2 cents in on the AI for FinOps piece. So I think you're really down the right road, Stefan. There we've taken that road, but we've got a slight slant on how we've been looking at it that I think is quite interesting. So my big belief is that successful FinOps in the organization requires FinOps to be a team sport. Everybody in the FinOps community talks about that quite regularly, but I've always felt as a tool vendor, a lot of tools are very focused on how do I empower the FinOps expert, and they don't think about the rest of the team. So what we've kind of tried to do a bit different is think about how do I make people play as a team, but help everybody level up. So what we've done with FinOps is there's a couple of different places we use AI. Many of them a bit like what you're talking about there, Stefan. But what I'm trying to do is there's a finite number of FinOps people. If your organization has one or a small team, you're probably doing quite well and quite lucky. A lot of companies don't really have a dedicated FinOps person. So that one FinOps person is going to be overwhelmed if they just have everything dumped on them. So what we want them to be able to do is coach other teams and let these teams do FinOps themselves. But we need to lower the barrier for them to be able to do it. So in the tool we've done, we try to think of AI as being like, explain to me what's going on here. So maybe it's something as simple as you look at a graph and you might have a bunch of engineers or even a team manager who doesn't understand the technical piece. He doesn't understand all of the data, but his boss is asking him, what's going on with your team's cost this week? And normally he would then have to go and get one of his engineers to down tools or get his FinOps person to drop what they're doing to answer his question for his boss. So we can have, the concept of explain what's going on with this graph, or even things like recommendations, take Azure Advisor. The number of people I talk to where they look at an Azure Advisor recommendation and it says, you'll save a bit of carbon if you do this, and you might save $100 a month, and they look at it and they go, I have actually no clue what this wants me to do. It just says some arbitrary thing, and that's why so many environments I see, they've just got thousands of recommendations that nobody does anything with because they have no clue. So if I can explain to you, this is what this means, this is how you do it, if things go wrong, this is how you roll it back, and here's your risks that you're carrying if you're thinking about this change. That bit of analysis on its own, I've saved that person at least an hour just for that one recommendation. But number two, I've probably saved them having to go to at least one other person to go, can you help me understand what this means? And then if you scale that up, even across quite a small team, that can be quite a big, significant amount of guidance. So it's almost like if we think of AI as being your extra FinOps practitioners that can help your team when you've got a limited amount of FinOps resource available, and then we just repeat that in the different areas, and then we've done some things like I think the anomaly detection one's a brilliant one that you mentioned there, Stefan, as well. I think there's different ways you can detect anomalies. We really like having like a sort of AI review the anomaly that's been detected and kind of say, because one of the challenges with anomalies is always I get too much noise or I wouldn't really care. So you might have an anomaly and you'd say, would anybody actually care? Because, really, really simple example would be my costs might have increased by 150%. And you'd think, oh my God, that's a huge anomaly. But actually, if the resource only costs you $1 a month, you just don't care. You know what I mean? So that's the kind of things where the AI can really help you with use cases like that.
Can I pop in, because I used to be in software development for a while in my life for some reason. Don't ask me why. And you talk about this, and I immediately imagine a UI improvement. Something like different roles of people joining, but also a level of understanding. So imagine I log in as a CFO. And it has buttons like explain it to me like I'm a geek, I don't know, not really a geek, but techie, a CFO, like other C-level, or like golden retriever puppy.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting UI interface that will probably make FinOps more palatable for people that are not FinOpsers.
Well, I think that's
what we are doing on our end. We basically classify the boards, so the UI, which we have been building in 3 broad categories, and then AI can help any of these different personas. We have the boss boards. They are providing a high-level summary. This is your cost trend over time. This is what has been saved. This is your different KPIs which you have agreed upon, like how much of your available spend or eligible spend is under a commitment coverage of some way, so you get a rebate. What's your effective MAC discount on Azure, which you're getting across all your consumption, etc. So the things which a CIO maybe wants to talk with the CFO about, or the CTO to say, this is a good investment, or is there something that we need to do? Then we've got the nerd boards, where it's really the nitty gritty, having hundreds of virtual machines and thousands of managed disks, and saying, this is your current configuration. This would, based on usage, be the optimal configuration, and the ability to export into Excel and then basically assign this as a manager to the people doing the work. And then we've got the normalo boards in between, which more focus at project managers, scrum masters, application owners, who need to report the cost of their application, have some technology knowledge, needed reasonably granular, but not as granular as the engineers, for example, need that. And to me, AI can come in at any of these points where the dashboard doesn't answer the person's question, and they would basically need to ask then a FinOps professional, create a service ticket with the tool vendor saying, hey, can I please have this modification to this view? Can I have this extra thing in there, please? Wait for it, pay for it, etc. Nowadays with AI, if the tool is providing an MCP interface, Azure, AWS, and Google, they all have their respective MCP servers. Set up a Claude environment, connect the MCP servers, build a skill, distribute this in your organization to everybody who needs it. So they basically can discover your Azure and your tool environment and just ask it questions. What did I spend on X last month? Can you give me a trend? Can you explain why this went up over the past 6 months?
I think at the end of the day, the FinOps framework tells us, with all the personas in the framework, that we have all these different people who have different contexts, different understandings, but we're often presenting them all the same data in the same way. And some of them will read, like you said, Stefan, with the nerd board versus the business board. Some people will really get one view of data and won't even have a clue what they're looking at. I think it's, FinOps is a team sport. We have to empower the team, not just the star striker.
Yeah. I also see that the quality of the recommendations which you're getting from the AI, if you just show it your data, is constantly improving. I remember I think it was just when ChatGPT released 5.0 or 5.1, I gave it a try and I got recommendations on Azure to replace a system with the version 2 VM series. That doesn't even exist. And I asked it, hey, do you know something which I don't? Because I've been around Azure for a long while, and in my book there is EV3. That's the first one it ever exists. And it said, yeah, sorry, I made a mistake. Sorry, bro. Thank you. If you see this a few times, you very quickly ask the question, like, what can I trust that is coming out of AI? But lately, don't try the free of charge models. If you give it to a Claude Flash, the Flash models, or the Claude Haiku, the Gemini Flash, or the free OpenAI models, you are not going to get credible answers. But then you take the thinking models, you ask it to look at your data, to look up some focus specifications, to look at best practices online, make it do a web search. So basically you plan for it like a little software development project. You get very, very good responses. And then you can always ask follow-up questions like, okay, how do I do this? Out of this list, what has very low risk? For what do I not have to restart my systems? There is no risk of breakage, for example. And this is, again, for me, a place where AI for FinOps can not just help the FinOps professional, but it can democratize this knowledge by making it very easily accessible to the normal people who don't have a degree in FinOps.
I think that's a really interesting point as well when you think about those recommendations, Stefan, because if we bring the two topics back together, every one of those recommendations that we run through FinOps, through AI, has a cost for the recommendation. So that's where as a person who builds a tool for FinOps, it's kind of, I don't want to give you 100 recommendations and then you use one of them, and then the next day you ask me for 100 recommendations again, because I know that I'm paying for 99 recommendations you're never going to use. And that's kind of one of the challenges as vendors put AI into a FinOps tool. or even if you build your own FinOps tool, it's like the cost you're incurring to produce recommendations. You've got to kind of find the right balance, because if you suddenly have a customer who deploys 10,000 VMs, then if you're running a recommendation in AI every single day, and the problem is the VMs may change, or there might be a database that changes, so the recommendation might change from one day to the next. But if nobody ever looks at it, it's actually wasted spend. So it's kind of like kind of comes full circle a bit if you think about it. And I think that applies to tools that we build that have nothing to do with FinOps. Every penny we spend on tokens in an AI, we really want it to have an ROI. Otherwise, it's just another form of cloud waste, isn't it?
Yeah. I'm also kind of curious if Claude is going to help me reduce my costs with Anthropic, or if it will only be good at helping me reduce my costs with the other AI providers. So I kind of wonder when the territoriality sets in with these tools.
Maybe there's a case that you have to use a Claude model in a different service provider. So maybe if you use like a Claude model in Azure AI Foundry, you'd get better recommendations for Anthropic than if you used it in their own service, or something, or vice versa. Interesting challenges.
Yeah, so there's a lot of new space out there, which I think is also a very interesting time, because if you're now if you're thinking about, hey, AI is reshuffling the job market, and this is one of the things which I do definitely see, also projects we are engaged in, people looking at replacing the automatable portion of work which other people are doing. One example, we were in an engagement where there was a large customer call center, and a call center agent, after every call, would have to write a call summary, basically summarizing what was just being discussed with the client. Took the agent on average 3 minutes, is now being done by an AI. So these minutes are now no longer consumed by agents. If you think that the average call maybe took 5 to 10 minutes, this is a significant reduction in the time the agents have to spend on that. And if you just say, hey, the number of calls remains constant, but now you need to spend less time on the aftercare of these calls, you can, of course, make the calculation that, hey, maybe a few people become no longer relevant. Now, in a call center with high attrition, likely nobody's going to lose their job. There will just be fewer people who are getting rehired. But if you see this whole AI thing as a threat to you, to your livelihood, to what am I going to do in 2 years from now, and this thing is getting even more mature than it is right now, becoming a good AI coder ain't that easy, because you kind of already need to know a lot of software engineering to get good coding results out of AI. But now finding ways how you can apply these AI abilities, which are available to everybody, and AI is even good at explaining you how to use it and how to become proficient at using AI. This may also be an opportunity for you to find new value for yourself, to your organization, to your employer, and to your future employers. And given that this is becoming a big cost concern, being this one person in a business function embedded in the whole conversation around a product development, who can, for example, check, hey, what are the costs of this? Are there some opportunities to improve this? So being able to work on the meta level may just be value for you to remain relevant in the future, even though your primary task today may get challenged by AI in the future. So,
I think with your point there, Stefan, I think what's important for people in jobs where they feel threatened is, like, for me, AI lets you do the thing that you all these ideas you have where wouldn't it be great if I could do this, and then you never have time and it's too difficult. And that's the way I've used AI a lot recently, is it's doing the things that could be really useful, but I just wouldn't be able to do them. And you can like knock up tools that help other people on the team. It would have took me 2 or 3 days. I can do it in an hour, and it can be impactful. And I think they're the things people need to sort of think about what new value can I use AI to help me add to the organization, and then you would stand out and you would be a difference maker, rather than just sit back and feel like AI is a threat. It can also be an opportunity.
Absolutely. And bringing this back to FinOps today, you spend so much time on trying to get these reports out there. And usually in organizations we go in, there will be some person reading the Azure cost, creating reports from that, and presenting this towards management to explain why a cost difference happened. And especially long-term cost creeps or long-term cost declines are a very hard one to catch. We talked about anomalies earlier. When you have a sudden cost spike, honestly, I don't need AI for that. I don't need complex tooling for that, because I'll see this big spike in the tool, and then I can drill down to which resource caused that spike, because it's usually a very limited amount of resources which just went completely crazy. But if you have, for example, a 6-month cost trend where an application which was already costly increased by 75%, and it's a disk here, a replacement of a VM there, adding some extra snapshots over here, bolting on something else there, deleting the old disk, but then creating a new disk, it becomes extremely messy to pull this all together, and you literally spend a day or more just building this report. AI can probably do this for you in 10 minutes. So this is also a way how you can become way more effective in the work you are doing. And back to what you said earlier, one FinOps person for a big company, for a big team, being completely stretched thin, if that person can have the AI ask a question against the data, create a report, create a briefing note, while that person can even do something else, while the AI chucks along behind the scenes as a background task and eventually presents the report, just reviewing it and then sending it on, that just saved the person one day to do something meaningful for the business and maybe make line go down someplace else.
You deep in thought there, Sasha?
Yeah, I've been thinking about the more generic problem of people being afraid that AI will replace them. If you're a call center worker and AI is replacing you, you're probably in a much worse position than FinOps or IT professionals or software management professionals that are afraid that, oh, what I'm doing right now is, AI can take that from me. What we always, when we think about these things, what we don't remember is that the almost like water in connected vessels is trying to level out. Demand and supply in business, in life, also levels out. We think that because now we can deliver better, the demand will stay at the same level. Therefore, the demands will be met with less effort and fewer people and maybe less expert work. No, it's not going to happen. And what's going to happen is that the businesses will then realize, okay, this problem is now solved. But business problems don't disappear. They just have different fractions of time that they're taking. I can give you an example from my own entrepreneur career. I've been trying. This is the fourth business of mine. I've been always trying to simplify the business and improve certain aspects. Sometimes make them completely disappear as a problem. Did my life become easier? Did I achieve the goal, which is unachievable, of lying on the beach and everything just working without me? No, because there are other things. And I got this one out of the way with AI, but I've got other things to fix, which have been on the back burner because this was the impediment. The same thing with FinOps and AI. You've been putting together these fantastic reports for the CIO. Now the CIO can go and just to the tool or to some kind of interface you built, and now they can spend 5 minutes instead of you spending days. Did your if your role is threatened by that, the question is, it probably isn't. First of all, don't just take it like this is the tragedy. I replaced myself. You will only be replaced if that is the only thing you can ever do. And you can't think strategically, you can't think what's next, you don't communicate with your CIO. Believe me, the people at the C-level, as one of those, they have other things to do. They have more problems to fix. You just move to the next stage. It's not, AI is not going to replace us. We'll have to level up though.
Yeah, very good point. I think the key one for me, listening to those bits. I think when you mentioned communication, Sasha, that's the key bit. I've every time I chat to you guys, I go away feeling a little bit of a buzz that we've had a really enjoyable conversation, and I get that off speaking to customers and doing online videos. You're never going to get that feeling off speaking to an AI or looking at a piece of work an AI has done. And I think that's how you stand out. So if you build an AI report and you save some time, try and make 10 minutes to go and speak to the person you're giving the report to and tell them what the report tells them, and then give them the report, and then you'll give them that little bit of happiness that they've spoken to a person. And that's, to me, that's the secret, isn't it? It's about making it personal, because AI is going to make it not personal in a way.
AI also doesn't take responsibility or even accountability. Claude tells me every time I open up my Claude app, Claude is an AI. AI makes mistakes. There's basically no throat to choke. So if the AI is giving you a bad report, try filing a complaint against the AI vendor. You can choke the throat of a vendor, of a service provider, of an employee, of a contractor giving you really bad advice, damaging your business. Wasn't there this case, which I saw on YouTube a while back, a video about this one, of a game development studio where the CEO bought a company that made Subnautica, and they had a contract which said, okay, high purchase amount and then bonus of $250 million if certain KPIs were met. The CEO decided to go with a ChatGPT recommendation to wriggle out of the bonus payment. That backfired spectacularly. So don't just blindly trust AI. Learn how to leverage AI in the work you are doing. Make it do the grunt work for you, the running around, the fetching of the data, the looking at 10,000 lines of data to make sense of this. Ask it the 17 follow-up questions, which would drive every other person nuts if you ask them 17 follow-up questions for the report. You generate a next report, follow-up question, next report, follow-up question, next report. Try this in real life with a human. AI doesn't mind. Continue digging until you have the things ready in a way that serve you. And then, Mike, as you say, package it in a nice presentation. AI can help with this too. And present it up. Explain the story, what this means, why this is relevant, why this has been a good investment, why this needs actioning, etc. And all of a sudden, AI, rather than being a threat, has become a very, very helpful addition to your tool chest, which as a FinOpser, you probably adopted new things on anyway, because how old is FinOps now? 6, 7, 8 years? Focuses around for a few years, means you likely had to adopt FinOps at one point in time. Then you had to move to the focus standard from whatever you build against build and amortized billing data before with the different cloud setups. So you're already changing. AI, to me, is just the next change. And it comes with both a new scope for you to play with, all these AI providers out there who don't even know what focus is at this point in time, or willfully don't want to support it because having good cost control, I don't think they want to have good cost control. They want to have a spending frenzy to get back the investments everybody's making. Because you only ever hear about these $100 billion investment there, data centers in space over the other side. Somebody needs to pay for this, and this someone is you.
Which comes back to our donations for our next webinar.
Exactly.
If somebody survived until this point, we have another webinar, the third in this series. And by the way, maybe we should continue this streak. I like it. Which is what, 4th of June, as far as I remember? We're going to send invites via LinkedIn, the typical annoying event invites. So those who are watching us on LinkedIn, if you're connected to me personally, because I send the invites, I'm going to be sending invites. So you can get them in your calendar. Huh?
4th of June. Yeah,
4th of June, same time, 10 a.m. UK time. Probably not so convenient for our American audience as well. But Europeans, can join live. And by the way, I'm reminding you, this you're watching a live event. And if you have any questions before we wrap up, and we'll start wrapping up now, please type them in the chat. You don't have to, but it would be nice to have some questions to answer. But I want to kind of converge. That's not the right word. Try and not even summarize. Get us to a certain point in this conversation. And you know what I'm struggling with is this is such still a new topic. FinOps has been around for, as Stefan said, almost 10 years. And the AI didn't appear yesterday. And these things didn't appear also yesterday. But we still feel like we still have teething problems. We're still making baby steps. We're still hitting the wall, going dark in the room. Because it's all new, and new for the majority of people in our world. Therefore, it's very difficult to draw a particular line under what we said today. So I think it's more like still a conversation opener. But I just want to say, don't mix FinOps and AI, FinOps for AI and AI and FinOps into one thing. However, that was an interesting point that Stefan made. I think if you use AI to analyze your AI costs, do you almost create like a never-ending loop of costs? Because that costs you as well. That's an interesting problem unsolved, and I don't think we can actually properly solve it. Yeah, and then both of you suggestion about different roles and summarizing and simplifying the results of the FinOps teams, which will probably help FinOps teams with communication, because the question of communication is also an inability to translate from our language to the language of the decision makers. And a good example is when we go in this conversation and this podcast into particular terms, like, you both drop in focus. A FinOps person, because it's not a new standard, they understand it's a special technical standard on how cost data is presented by the cloud platforms. It's something you put into Excel, and if Excel knows how to process that type of data, it can summarize it, it can give you some insights. I don't think people who are at the beginning of the journey or C-level, they even know that that standard exists. They don't even know that there is a problem why the standard exists and what problems does the standard solve. Their question is basically, I want to bring my cloud costs and AI costs under control. I don't want that $500 a day suddenly hitting my bill. So
I think that's already
AI, what I was going to say is AI and FinOps will help, if you use it properly, communicating that and increasing the value of ITAM and FinOps in the eyes of business decision makers.
I think I was going to say this, Sasha, that I think we need to remember that when a company does a FinOps initiative, most of the stakeholders who have any involvement in the initiative aren't members of the FinOps Foundation, probably don't know what FinOps is, and probably don't care what FinOps is. They just have a problem that they want to not have to think about, because nobody's core job except a FinOps practitioner is make cloud efficient and not spend too much. What they want to do is deliver the requirements that their business users are asking for, and deliver the value and have it not cost so much that people ask about it. And FinOps is actually the way we solve the problem, but most people don't really know the detail. It's a bit like, most people in a let's say we're building an application, most people don't know what code we're writing or what language we're using and don't care. It's the same thing. And I think that's where the AI or FinOps piece can help us communicate to those people in their language that they understand, to help them get their little various needs met without us spending loads of time trying to look after every single stakeholder.
And
I'm wondering if we can
I would like to, close this one out, and then Sasha, for you to do the wrap up, is I've seen FinOps teams also struggling with articulating the value they are bringing to the business, especially if, even though they are doing God's work, the cloud bill still increases because the organization is just ramping up and doing more. And eventually the question comes up, what the heck is a FinOps team doing? this is also an answer which you can get so much easier from a Claude Opus with MCP connectivity into your focus data and into your cloud estate, where you can basically dig through the last 6 months and say, hey, all these initiatives have resulted in a like-for-like reduction of cost, and our cost would have been so much higher had we not done these activities, which all of a sudden helps you as a FinOps team communicate your value upstairs, which maybe you have to.
I would probably not waste any more time because we've hit the top of the hour and we need to let our viewers go and do their normal daily tasks. I think we need to continue this conversation. I'm thinking of maybe running a LinkedIn poll, asking people what they're interested more about in FinOps, in AI, or AI for FinOps. That would be an interesting poll. And LinkedIn also, when you do your polls on your personal page, it shows you who answered what. Because I just want to see actually where the interest is right now. Is it more for practitioners, AI for FinOps? I would suspect for people who don't want to waste money, it's more FinOps for AI. But we'll see. I'll try and do that. And by the way, Mike, feel free to do it on your page as well. That will be an interesting comparison. Yeah,
I'll share your poll. We'll try and get it in one place.
Amazing. Thank you very much who's been here with us. I think we have a comment. Let me have a look. That was just a thanks. Well, thank you for being with us. Thank you for being here today. And if you are on LinkedIn, you're probably already following us. If you are on YouTube and you suddenly just randomly dropped in, you can always subscribe or find us on LinkedIn. And welcome back. Let's have a discussion. Thanks a lot. Have a great day, and thank you, gents, for participating.